Welcome to Read Radio, the official podcast of Fraser Valley Regional Library.
Hi, my name is Deanna, and I'm a librarian with FVRL. Today, Beka Shane Denter and guests from her new book, Bloom Across Canada, are joining us today. Welcome and hello, everyone. I'm excited to have you all here. Before we get started asking some questions and getting to know you, do each of you want to introduce yourself? And I'll just start with sort of how you guys show up on my Zoom screen here. So we'll start with Beka.
Hi, my name is Beka Shane Denter. I'm a writer and author, Canadian, and currently living in Denmark. And the temperature here today, I believe, is -10.
Excellent. It's a lot chillier. I think in Abbotsford today, I checked, it was +2 when I left my house. And my car gave me a warning that there might be ice, which I always find hysterical. Next on my screen is Kim. Hello, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Kim Taylor, and I am a potter and photographer based on Gabriola Island in British Columbia. It's also 2 here, which feels quite balmy.
Fantastic. Next is Carla on my screen.
Hi there, I'm Carla Tack, and I live in downtown Vancouver, right beside Chinatown. And it's a gray day today, and it's about 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And next I have Mallory.
Hi, my name is Mallory Tolcher. I'm also known as Me the North, and I am a visual artist. I specialize in sculpture and installation. I'm based out of Guelph, but I'm often in Toronto as well. And it's just -3 here, but we had a huge snowfall, so it's like beautiful and white outside.
Oh, that's lovely. Next I have Jill.
Hi, my name is Jill Pangman, and being a wilderness tourism operator for some decades and also involved with wilderness conservation issues. In the Yukon, I live in Whitehorse, just outside Whitehorse, Yukon, and it's +2 today. We're in the middle of a horrible thaw. It feels a little spring-like, just a few months early.
Thank you for joining us. Next I have Peace.
Hello, my name is Akintade. I am based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I am the Saskatchewan Poet Laureate, specializing in poetry, visual art, fabric work, and also an intimacy director here in the prairies. And it is -30 over here. So we are getting the worst of everyone. While you guys enjoy the spring, we are enjoying the winter. But yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you're staying warm. Next I have Joyce.
Hi, I'm Joyce Majiski. I'm a visual artist, a multimedia artist, and I also live in Whitehorse in the Yukon in that unseasonably warm winter of 2 degrees.
And last I have Silvia.
Hi, my name is Silvia Tennant. I am a size-inclusive jewelry designer as well as a curve model based in Vancouver, BC. And outside it is a balmy 4 degrees.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, thank you all for joining me from across Canada in your various temperature climates. And thank you for joining us, Beka. I think you are the furthest away, joining us all the way from Denmark.
I think so, yes.
So my first question for Beka, after Bloom Where You're Planted, your first book, was there always a plan to write another book, or were you inspired from the success of the first one to expand and interview more people?
Yeah, actually, I think halfway through the first book, I had already decided and started work on Bloom Across Canada because I was receiving emails from people asking me to do interviews like I had done with magazines with people across the country. And I said, well, actually, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing this book, but let me think about this. And it just really came together so quickly and easily because even just within BC, I could have done 200 people easily and still not have filled everybody up. So doing across the country was definitely a plan halfway through. And I just felt like the work wasn't quite done yet. And I wish I could do one for every province and territory because there's really that much talent in Canada.
That's fantastic. So this question is for you and all of your guests as well. So for Beka, what surprised you the most as you were conducting the interviews? And then for the guests, what was the experience like being interviewed and having your stories told in this book?
I guess for me, what surprised me the most about the interviews was as different and unique as they each were, there was also some consistent themes that connected all of them together in both books, and now even in the third book that I've just finished work on. And what I enjoyed most too about the interviews was that people were just so forthcoming and happy to share and wanting to be open and honest about their journey, the snapshot of their journey we were talking about. And I really didn't feel like I was pulling teeth or like, pulling out information from people. People were just so generous with sharing. And it was just such a beautiful, easy series of interviews to do.
That's wonderful. And we'll just go around the room again. So Kim, you're first on my screen. What was the experience like being interviewed and having your stories told in this book?
So for me, mine was interesting because Beka and I had gone back and forth a couple times. From the inception of the book and the beginning of the talks, I was living on Denman Island. I was in a different place and I was doing pottery. By the time the questions came through, we had sold our Denman property. I was back in town. I was back to photography. So I answered my questions based on that. Now, when the book came out, we are settled back on a different island and I'm back to pottery. So I found it I enjoyed it a lot because she was so flexible with being able to sort of go with the flow with my world just turning upside down at one point. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was neat. And it also made me sort of step back and look at how I would answer the questions, and it makes you analyze your life and sort of what it looks like and what it, potentially looks like from the outside versus being in the thick of it.
That's wonderful. Really cool. And Carla, what was your experience like?
Well, first of all, I was very honored, and when I got the email from Beka, surprised and just really thrilled to be part of it. And then talking with Beka was really an amazing experience. I just found her so open, so easy, deep, and I had quite a few deep things to reveal, and not a lot of people sometimes want to hear it. I think they're important things to be said. And Beka was incredibly sensitive in helping me and supporting me in saying these things. And I'm so thrilled with how everything came out, Beka. Yeah, you were amazing. And to be part of this group of, that I'm meeting right here now. And I met Dana before in my studio, but I'm really so thrilled to be here with you and with the others that aren't here to be part of this. So very excited at 71 to have this honor of being in my first book. Thank you, Beka. Thanks, everyone.
That's wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
And Mallory.
I think it's funny that Beka said it was so easy because it totally speaks to her as a person. I felt like when I first got on the phone call with her after she reached out, it was like talking to a sister. We talked about our kids and we laughed, and I didn't really need to fill in the smaller details. I felt like she really understood my work and what I was trying to do. And so I was really thrilled to be a part of it because I knew that Beka would hold my story and take care of it and have respect for what I do and what I'm trying to say. So it was easy for me to share my story, but also through the process, it was changing, just like Kim. I would have an interview on Sportsnet and Beka would be like, we have to put that in. You have to write that. So it was a good back and forth, but it was an absolute pleasure.
That's so great to hear. I know from talking from Beka, we had her join us in 2023. And I remember it was another interview set up. I remember us just talking a lot. And next on my screen is Jill.
Yeah, so when Beka contacted me, I thought, well, this will be interesting to be a part of it. I wasn't entirely sure the nature of, I realize, and looking at the book now, I'm more on the wilderness tourism and conservation end, and I certainly done some writing and photography and have that sort of creative aspect as well. but that Beka just seemed open to whatever the stories were and honoring whatever anyone's story was. And so, yeah, it was an enjoyable process and interesting just to see what would get distilled out of the process.
Thank you. Peace.
Yeah, same sentiments, even as what Kim said. I was in different stages of my life when the interview came in. I just came off of being Youth Poet Laureate, and this was almost like the last thing that I'll do as the Youth Poet Laureate. And then when I was doing the interview, I was in that transitional phase where I was just a freelance artist. So honestly, I didn't really know what I could talk about, but Becca did such a wonderful job at really showing that your story is so important. And even if you're in that transitional phase, that it can be something that people can talk about and people want to listen to and read. And I just felt honored that, I could represent Saskatchewan in this book because it's such an overlooked artistic hub. It really is the most beautiful place to be an artist. You have like rock stars and pottery artists sitting in a cafe together. And that's what I wanted to show in my edition of the book. And the first thing that I did now as Poet Laureate was getting that book with that story and seeing how that journey has changed for me. And so it just felt like it captured the passage of time for me, this book and this interview. And that's why I feel very fortunate that I was part of it. So thank you. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Sounds amazing. Thank you. Joyce.
Well, I'm not really sure if I can add much more to what's been said already. I think from my perspective, there's never enough books about women, by women, for women, and for to be included in that kind of a collection is really exciting for me. It's a nice way to consolidate different people's experiences and ideas and thoughts together. I mean, there's 50 of us. There's 50 stories of women across the country. We all live in different provinces and territories. And each of us think we live in the best place in the world, of course.
Of course.
So that's always really fun because I'm listening to Peace going, oh no, you haven't been to Whitehorse, have you? So yeah, I was honored to be part of this. And I think, I'm not sure exactly how Beka picked everyone, but I believe that my name came up through a mutual friend in Vancouver. And my initial thought was, oh, there are so many cool women here. You've got to actually talk to these others. And I gave her a whole list of people to talk to. So I know that Jill came out of that list. But like you said earlier, you could do a book from each province and territory, and you would just be scratching the surface of the amazing people that live in this country. And kudos to you, Beka, for shining a light on the ones that you did. So I think it's probably something that will inspire other people to carry on with that idea. And how wonderful is that?
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite parts about both Bloom Where You're Planted and Bloom Across Canada was interviews with folks around Canada and around BC and actually getting to hear their stories. And it's all written by another woman. And Silvia.
I mirror everyone's sentiments when I say that it was truly an honor. I immediately, when Beka reached out, I immediately Googled her, and I learned that she had quite a robust history in fashion writing, and as the owner of a small brand that had a very strong, unique angle on the accessories industry, I knew that my story would be in very good hands. So it was such a pleasure to speak with her. It was so organized. The email follow-up, everything was, I felt like I had the best babysitter. It was wonderful. She really not only shared our stories, but held us through the process. For many of the amazing women in this book, I think it was our first time being in a book or being featured in this way in a book. So the process is new, and Beka held such beautiful space for me, and I'm certain for everyone. And I'm it's just so cool to memorialize this chapter in my life, in my story, and I'm in awe of the other stories in this book, and it really is just so special.
And yeah, I totally agree with everything you guys have said. So for Beka, this kind of is a good segue into this question for you. How did your experience writing Bloom Where You're Planted shape your writing in this book? Did you have some new tools for your interview skills from going through the first book and interviewing people that you used in this book?
Well, I think that I had been doing profiles pretty steadily for different platforms starting in 2018. So I had a couple of years experience and then another with the second book. And so for me, the interview format came really naturally, and it felt like a really easy way to communicate these really important parts of people's journeys compared with like feature writing where you're setting a scene and tone, place. And it was a way to shine the spotlight and keep the focus on the person being interviewed. And I'm kind of just more like a guide through the conversation. That was kind of the intent from the start. And that has kind of come through now. As I've progressed to the second book and now the third book, I've definitely refined the process, and it's definitely come a lot more quickly and naturally. And I just found it was such a great format. And the feedback from readers too has been, I just really enjoy this kind of format. It's easy to read, pick up, put down. It's accessible and enjoyable. So really, it's always a learning process, always. I mean, I think all of us can attest to that no matter what we're doing. But definitely, I feel very comfortable in that format. And I found that the people I was interviewing were too, and that was of the utmost importance.
Yeah. I know when I was reading both books, I liked that it almost felt like bite-sized pieces that you were reading, because like the book, it's large and it looks intimidating, but once you actually get reading it, you can go through it pretty quickly. And each profile, like you can just pull out the things that you want to focus on and read through really quickly. So I love that about the book.
Yeah, and it's a book that I hope that people go back to as well. You know, you pick it up down, and even my 80-year-old aunt had a great time reading it. It took her about 2 months to get through it. Granted, she doesn't work, but
yeah. I read it on ebook as well. So then it actually helped sort of focus up, because it was like one question would show up per page on my ebook, and then I'd read it and then like just go through and through and through. So it flowed really naturally. So for the guests, was the interview process easy, or was there anything that sort of surprised you as you were going through it?
Can I just answer for Brittany?
Yeah, for sure.
I know she really wanted to be a part of it, and I'll just read her answer if that's okay. So Brittany is a model and sustainability activist based in Toronto and New York. And she said, I've been told by many that I'm an open book, but when reading parts of my story in hard copy, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. It felt more concrete than a temporary social media post or conversation with a close friend. This wasn't a book that would be read by many all over. I not only questioned how I shared parts of myself, but also my credibility in doing so. After reading through the other stories, I felt honored to be included amongst so many inspiring individuals who are vulnerable in their storytelling as well. And that sense of vulnerability quickly changed to pride and gratitude.
Thank you for sharing that. So maybe this time I'll do it in reverse order, so it's not all the same people going first. So we'll start with Silvia this time.
I really wanted to come from a place of meaningful reflection. Like if these words were going to be in a book, they better be, these answers better be good. And it was so wonderful to be able to take stock of, it's almost like writing your own biography or if you get asked to do something, they're like, who are you and what do you do? And it's like, wow, who am I and what do I do? And so it was really special to be able to take stock of what I care about and what I want to say. And it was so wonderful to be able to do that with a sounding board that had such great leadership that is Beka, because she knew what to ask me and she understood the magic that I wanted to put out into the world. And in doing so, I mean, there's just so much magic to be shared in this book. So it was so special.
That's amazing. Thank you. And Joyce, what was the interview process? Was it easy, or did anything surprise you?
I think the interview and the whole process of reflection has come at an interesting part of my life, because I've been in this whole reflective state anyway, and looking at my art career and my life as of all the things that I've done that's led up to that and have contributed to that in a different way, rather than look at bodies of work. As an artist, you have a statement about this particular body of work or that particular body of work. But when you look at a lifetime of work, of 40 years of work, then you think, oh, okay, so what links all of those things together? And the visual artist will sort of get a sense of this, is like, what is the thing that runs through my entire life, the things that I care about, the things that have happened to me that contribute to that. And I think it's been a really good way to kind of go through that and distill out some of those ideas, because earlier in a person's life, you can be one thing or you can be another thing. And, Jill and I have been friends for a long time, and we've done a lot of things together, and we've run a business together. And I've still been an artist through all of that. So it was an interesting process for me to kind of contextualize my life in a bigger sense. And I think that's what it was, and actually talk about some difficult things and a crux point in my life where I did make a big change. So I think the earlier person's comments about vulnerability, and then sitting back and going, did I really want to say that? And then it's like, no, this is true. This is my truth. And it's okay to talk about those things. So yeah, it's been an interesting process, and to see everybody else in the book with a similar sort of, thought process has been really good.
Fantastic. Yeah. Peace. Do you want to go next?
The interview process, I feel, was quite easy for me, just because there's another side of being an open book, and then being a poet, and knowing that everything that I say and write is always introspective. I am constantly always asking myself, why am I doing what I do? And so whenever I get the chance for someone to ask me for an hour and just let me ramble and yap for an hour about all the things that I am thinking about, I found it a blessing. To me, I feel that with interview processes, it's rather about, how my life has been from beginning to end or beginning to middle, but more about what do I have to say to the world. And, when you are in a book full of 50 women from all over Canada, the one thing that came into mind is community. And when I based a lot of my answers on community, I found that the interview questions, though intimidating at first, I had to really sit down with some of them, came quite easy during the answering process because of that theme and background on community. And that is what I want to do all the time. That is my daily life, is constantly being around people and learning from people and listening and talking, and you do that over and over again. And so it's so wonderful that it's captured in this portion of the book. It's that capturing of what my community looks like. And so, yes, I felt quite held in that, because the book is about that. It's about community, about what these 50 women from across Canada do to create community amongst and within themselves. So, yeah, it was quite lovely, easy, breezy, beautiful.
I love that. Thank you. And Jill.
I was just saying that I didn't find it difficult, the interview process, but I enjoyed the questions that Beka asked, and I found it helped me sort of distill my own life down into what was essential. The journey that I've taken from, as a child even, but primarily as an adult coming up to now, the choices I've made as to where to live and what to focus my energies on. I feel like I've been very fortunate to be able to focus on what I'm truly passionate about. And some of the questions, like when Beka asked who, where, and what inspires you, I find a question like that really helps. You only have so much time and space, to write down. You really have to distill what is truly, what has inspired me and what continues to inspire me. And then weaving in, my background or deep commitment and concern about the state of the environment, about the future of wild country, because that's what inspires so much passion in me and in in what I've worked in and what I've done for volunteer work and what I do in my spare time. As much time as possible is spent out in the wilds, and that really is what infuses so much meaning for me. She also brought in, becoming being a parent, and how that has woven in, as another passionate part of my life. So, yeah, I enjoyed the whole process and found it was a good way to try to distill those aspects of my life that have brought me to where I am now. Thanks.
Very cool. Thank you. And Mallory.
I personally found it really hard. I found, I'm sorry, but like the first question that Beka asked me was, what was my first memory of art? And it was hard for me to kind of come up with my origin story. I'm so used to talking about my work now and what it means and the connections to more like contemporary culture, and to sit back and try to think about like the earliest memory or the very beginning connections and how those have woven into my work now. I still think I like struggle with this today. And so to have like Beka push me and make these connections, probably unknowingly, but of course she's brilliant, so she knows what she's doing. It allowed me to it allowed me to kind of be vulnerable and scared that maybe I was taking a stand on something, or maybe I was using words that like actually really meant something to me. And I think that like she also allowed for space for the story to continue. So that was why it wasn't super scary. I know that like I had to put things down into words, but then there was room for that to evolve. And so, yes, I think it was really scary and terrifying, but also thrilling and exciting to make those connections and be like pushed out of my comfort zone to try and really like think about those important things and like how they meant to me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. And Carla.
The last one, everybody said it so well, and I can hear everyone, and I feel so much like that's how I felt on so many levels. I found it super easy, and I'm wondering if it's because of that I've had so much therapy. I've had therapy over the last 35 years. I'll even say that I spent over 100,000 on therapy. That's how much I needed it. It really saved my life. So I think the fact that, I started at 14 even with Fritz Perls Gestalt therapy. When I first quit school and went to art school, and then felt like a failure at art school. But I think just being in that environment of the therapeutic process for all those years has just made me analyze my life constantly, just constantly looking, figuring it out. So really the questions when they came to me were just very quick answers for that. And very proud to be part of it again. And I loved hearing what you guys all said. And I love how you add all your words. You all sound like great writers, actually. And Beka, and I don't see Beka here right now, but I know you're there, Beka. You're just so gentle and amazing. Thank you.
And Kim, what was the interview process like for you?
For me, I found the interview process easy, but I can also relate to Brittany when she said that how she felt so vulnerable looking at reading the book when it actually came out and seeing how the content that she'd provided, the story that it told. I find that I often question myself in hindsight because I blur the lines between sort of intimate information and public information, and then I question that afterwards. But I think that happens because authentically, what you see is what you get with me. I share what I'm feeling, sometimes probably too much. So for me, the interview process was easier than the reading of my part after, I will say. The first time I read it, I skimmed it, I shut the book, I put it down, and then I've gone back and revisited it. But it's funny to see things written about you that you provided. Yeah, so that's sort of where I was with it. The interview process was lovely, and it's taken me time to come to grips with, but it's my story. And so I'm proud of my story because I'm proud of where I am now. But yeah, I could really relate when Beka said Brittany had felt that sense of vulnerability and kind of a little bit of shock of, oh my gosh, that's who I am, and I put that out there.
Because I could imagine that having your story told is one of like the most vulnerable experiences you can have, especially when you're putting it out for other people to read and consume. So thank you all for sharing your stories so much. I know the book has meant a lot to a lot of people when they're reading through it. And so that kind of segues a little bit into a question for Beka. What was the hardest part about writing this book? Because you are taking sort of these very vulnerable, very important stories from other people and trying to put them in a book that is going to be consumed and read by other people.
Well, I think first and foremost is that everybody feels seen and that their story is seen as authentic as can be for them. And that's why there was a little bit of back and forth, like, can you read it again? It was really important that they felt seen and that the voice and the story, the snapshot was authentic. And that was easy for me to do because and thank you to all of them because I really did, pour my heart into it. And I do want everyone to feel safe and held. And, it was a safe space and there was no right or wrong answers. It was just like they had total say, like 100% had to be okay with them before I submitted it to my publisher and editor. So that was hard. But also I think for me, it was as I wrapped up the third book this week, it's been the energy and the stamina required to kind of keep that going for me as a writer, holding that space for people. And I'm happy to do it and I wouldn't change a thing about it. But it does require a lot of energy and time and effort to kind of, organize and to stay on top of everybody without being annoying or nagging and just so that the work gets done. But I wouldn't change anything because I think it was worth it. And I would do it all over again if I could. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for putting the work and the effort into collecting all of the stories and making them available for everyone to read. I have a question that I thought of as I was listening to everyone talk today. Because some of you talked about being in a transitional stage of your life when you were being interviewed, and some of you talked about looking at your entire life story. Was the interview process, because you were being asked questions about your life, which kind of, in my mind, made me think of memoirs and biographies and things like that. Was the interview process with Beka of writing this book more you telling your life story, or is it more a snapshot in time where at the moment when she was interviewing you, this is what your life was like, this is what you were doing? Or was it a mix of both?
And well, I think I would just before they started with the
go for it.
Because I did kind of present it as a snapshot because, I think that's only fair. You can't pass a whole lifetime of experience in like 3 pages.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they can answer how they want, of course. But I know for me, it was definitely asking them to do a snapshot because if I had interviewed them 5 years prior or 5 years in the future, it would be a totally different interview.
Absolutely. We'll start with Silvia.
It was really special for me to go into this, obviously giving the current status of my career and what I'm up to, but also make these sentimental links to how it all came to be. I think the understanding the root of a creative idea or the root of someone's journey is so important to understanding where they are right now. So to be vulnerable and to be able to share some of those details, for me, it was sharing my earliest memories with jewelry, and it was a memory with my mom. And it was so special to be able to read that part with her. The first time I read that part of the book, I had her over and we read it together. And it was so wonderful to bring forth that why. And I joke and say that I was bred to be a jewelry designer because I come from a long line of very sparkly women. But most importantly, I was given the space to be able to play and to create. And so I guess that is both the past and my present. But had I not had those very important moments with her, I wouldn't be where I am now.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, I have Joyce.
Any interview that you do in your lifetime is going to be a snapshot of where you are at that moment, so you're focused on the things that are happening, but the questions meant that you had to be a bit more reflective. And I think that's where, for me, it ended up being more of a look back, like what are your earliest memories of this? And then you kind of step into that memoir state where you are wondering, where did this come from, and some of the other participants actually mentioned that as well. So maybe it's something that you just step back and forth from, I'm here in this moment because I had this other pivotal moment, and your life takes a turn or something else happens. Your whole existence is going to be a set of pivotal moments where you make a decision and you go one way or the other, or something happens or something big happens in your life. So the writing of a book and publishing of a book, it's a long process. So, you start 2 years ago, that book isn't going to get onto the shelf for a while. So there's a lot of time for your life to change within that span of time. So yes, it's a snapshot. And yes, it's a memoir. And yes, your life is going to change.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of how I feel. I look at what I wrote and I think, oh yeah, well, that's relevant. And I would have said this. Maybe I would have said that. But for the moment, that's what it was,
Absolutely. It's very true. Thank you. And Peace.
Yeah, same sentiment. I feel like because whenever I get interviewed for things, and it's become kind of a frequent thing these past few years, I've started to become a little cynical about interviews. Um, definitely after. It was more after, way more after. But so much after. But I became cynical because it felt like it was always the same question for me. And it always had to be, because if I'm a poet, it always has to be, what's your inspiration for poetry? How do you get inspired by poetry? Or like, what's your favorite word? Or what's your favorite color? And it never grabs deeper than that. And so I've started creating games where I try to say the most absurd thing that I can for every single answer. Just okay. Stay with me. Just because I feel like there's certain questions that it's so important that you can be reflective, even if it's like a shot in time about this moment. At this moment, all I am feeling is that I am working, and then I have to leave the interview and I have to go back to work. And it's like I'm getting stopped so that I can talk about what I'm already doing, and so it started that thing of what does interviews feel like to me. And then I got the book and I read my section and I read it, and it felt so good to be like, oh, this was when I had such great, lovely, unabashed passion for wanting to talk about my work. This is before the hundreds of what's your greatest inspiration for poetry. This was questions that made me feel like I can talk about my past, my present, and what I hope for in the future. And that really shows like just the energy that interviews can be. That's all to say that my favorite question ever was, what's your earliest memory of art? Because although it makes me go to my past, it does remind me of what I want my present and future to look like. And my earliest was in a festival at 5. And in Nigeria, we have these giant masquerades where there's these people in like 15-foot masquerade masks. And at 5, I ran after them because if you catch them, then they get to tell you a story. And that was like my earliest memory. And that's exactly what I wanted. And I was reading that in the book and I was like, oh, I want to be that kid. I want to be that kid. But now I'm the masquerade that everybody's chasing for a story. Metaphor. That's a metaphor. But that's how I felt. And I think that with this process, it really felt like a snapshot, but also a reminder of my past and of who I was to 2 years ago. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Jill.
Well, I think Joyce said it really well. And probably everyone else, as well, as far as being a bit of a combination of an overview or memoir type, looking on one's life, as well as a snapshot in time. I think for me, it was more of an overview, looking back on what my passions that have really driven me and brought me to this point in my life. And I was curious, because it was a while ago that these interviews happened, when I was seeing it in the book and reading, the very last question was a place you want to explore, because so much of my life, it has been about exploring wild country. And it talked about wanting to do a long trip up in the Arctic National Refuge in Nunavik, up in the north coast of the Yukon and Alaska. And I was thinking, well, I did that. Here I'm talking about the future, a dream I had of having time in the summer to do a journey like that. And a year and a bit ago, my son and I, with a couple of friends, did a long backpacking trip through that country. And it was just such a phenomenal experience. So it was interesting. That was a snapshot in time, looking ahead to something I wanted to do. And now it's a snapshot back. That happened. So anyway, it's a combination in memoir and snapshot.
Wonderful. Mallory.
I definitely think it was a snapshot because the interview would be totally different if we did it today. But I do think because my artwork deals with like strong themes of gender and femininity and sport, it only felt right to like deep dive into why I have those strong beliefs and values of showcasing that and why that is my life and what I do. So Beka was good at asking the why and then focusing on the now. So I think although it did start from early memories, it was a good snapshot of like, well, how did those kind of values and belief systems actually influence what you do now? So I think it was a little bit of all of the things that, again, everybody has said.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Carla.
I don't have much to add to that. Everybody, I feel everything's really been covered. I just really love the questions that Beka had, and for me, definitely a snapshot. And again, the therapeutic journey is just always so much about going deep and constantly looking at so many things. It was just very comfortable for me and just the way she was to talk about my life and what it was and where it is and where it's going. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Kim.
Well, I do think Joyce just nailed it. So I don't know that you can capture but for me, I think it was a bit of a snapshot in the way that it captured what I was doing with my art right then. But my part of the book shares that I reconnected with an old love after 20 years. And that ultimately brought me back to Canada. And that's why I'm in the book. So I guess it has a mix for me because it did, the story wound its way to the reasons that I'm here and allowed me to be a part of it. So I think for me, I had both.
Thank you so much. And I have a final question for Beka. I know it's probably a question you've been asked in every interview, but for those of our listeners that haven't heard you speak on this before, what writing advice would you give someone who wanted to go about and do something similar, interview people, get people's life stories? Do you have any advice about how to do the interviews, how to make people comfortable, and then how to actually write the interview?
Well, I don't think that this series can be replicated because somebody coming at it will have a completely different take, a different reason, a different why. The advice I guess I have for people who are going to pursue any kind of writing is to write about what you know, what you love, what moves you, what inspires you, what you're curious about. And then the rest will just kind of come together. That's really what it's about. And this really came from a place of curiosity, a place, and it started during the pandemic as a passion project. So there were so many layers to the way I approach this that cannot be replicated by another person because they're going to have their own unique way of doing it. But again, I always say, write what you know. And I used to tell that to my grade 9 and grade 12 English students when I was a teacher. Write what you know when we're doing personal essay. What are you curious about? And I really do believe that if you follow your gut and you're authentic to what you want to focus on, it will all come together organically. I really do believe that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I want to thank all of you again for coming from all of your different time zones and climates and parts of the country to talk about both a little bit more about your life experience and your experience writing this book. And I want to thank Beka for joining us today and helping to arrange this podcast with all these lovely folks today. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for being so open and willing. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our show. Remember, the library is always open. Check out the digital content tab on our website to access ebooks, audiobooks, online learning, streaming video, and some fun stuff for kids. Find all this and more at FVRL.ca.